and what's that? It's a iPod, and it follows me around while I'm lecturing, and then I'll be recorded. So that'll be recorded. Those of you guys who are remote, you need to keep your microphones muted. Mohammed, that means you. All right, good. So let's try to get this show on the road. Hopefully I'll have the technology figured out a little better as we move forward. Did you guys print off a hard copy of your syllabus?
I looked at it.
You got one here?
Yeah.
Okay. Who all needs one?
I'll take one. I mean, I'll take one. I looked at it. I didn't print it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, just if you don't have it here. Let's see. I think there's Grant. Clay, you have yours.
Anybody else? Or an extra?
All right, so my first question is, have any of you not had class with everyone else here?
I have.
You haven't. Okay, so you're the newbie, other than you know these guys, kind of, some of them. Okay. So let's start off with you giving an introduction. So yeah, you waited for this class because you knew it was going to be devastating to your GPA.
Right.
Is that why?
And life as a whole.
And life as a whole, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't you introduce yourself to everybody. Let's see, I wanted actually one more camera. Not that we need another one, but go ahead, Clay.
I'm Clay. I work in the admissions office here. I'm an alum, and this will be my 7th class. I took a pretty long break,
Yeah.
so I'm back on the train now.
Okay, good. All right, and let's see. Geez, I don't even know if I can fit in this power bar anymore.
I'd have to unplug you. I think I can do some rearranging.
Otherwise, most of you have been working through the program together?
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm trying to just set up is a camera for these guys remotely to see you guys. Which might get all together too crazy, but I'm always up for a challenge. Let's see. 737. Okay. Sorry. There we go. There we go. There. Should be done. It's beautiful. Because of the layers. That's not good. I hear you guys. We got one too many. Aha. There we go. Sorry. All right, I'm done fooling around with this now, maybe for a little while, even though we don't got everybody on there. All right, sorry if you're in the limelight there and don't want to be, but okay. Whew. Czech Republic.
Women's soccer.
Women's soccer.
Lizzie Willett from Lindsay Johnston, Lacey, Kansas, and marketing.
Marketing, okay.
Leanne Spesser, Paris, Illinois, track and field.
Track and field, okay. We got Mohammed. Keith and Shanita, why don't you guys go? Keith, why don't we start with Keith?
Okay, I'm Keith Dangaremwa from Zimbabwe, and I'm a men's soccer GA. Can I also say that I'm at a leadership academy here, so there might be traffic behind me. I've got my earphones in so that it keeps it all quiet, but just a heads up.
Okay, no problem.
Hello, my name is Shanita. I'm from Maryland, and I am a GA for Student Affairs. Hi, Lizzie.
And Shanita, do you got any way to turn on some, either draw the blinds behind you or put on a light inside your room? All we have is your silhouette. All right, we'll let her get settled in on that. Okay, so let's go over the syllabus real quick here. So my name is Russ McCullough. I've been at Ottawa now for 3 years. This was the very first class I taught when I started. It was the Managerial Economics class. So for those of you who don't know, I'm the Wayne Angel Chair of Economics, which means a very good donor and person, supporter of OU, donated $1 million to set up a position for me to continue to be here, which is pretty sweet. So I'm very honored to be the Wayne Angel Chair, and we'll try to carry on the great things that he did. He started back in the, well, it was about the 1960 when he started here, but he went here as an undergrad, then he went to KU for his PhD, came back here and taught for 25 years, and then in 1985, he was appointed to the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, which might not mean a lot to you, but there's about 7 human beings in the United States that control the supply of money, and he was one of them in 1985. So it's kind of a big deal in the economics world. A big, 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 big deal, yeah. And so does anybody know who the current chairperson of the Federal Reserve is? Anybody remotely? The chairperson, I'm kind of giving you a hint that it's the first female ever to serve there, so it's a female. Janet Yellen. Janet Yellen is an economist who is serving as the chair of the Federal Reserve now. And so she, along with 6 others, control the supply of money in the United States. And that's what Wayne Angel did back in the mid-1980s. So I am originally from Minnesota, not too far from Wisconsin, and went to graduate school at Iowa State University in 1993. Same year I got married, and it was kind of a big change. Moved down to Iowa, and there I got involved with a guy doing property management and while I was going to graduate school, and when I was all but dissertation for my PhD, he lured me away from academia and gave me a piece of his real estate business. And so I kind of had to earn my way through it, but I had an ownership share in that real estate venture. And so we did primarily college student housing. We had about 800 apartment units across the street from Iowa State. And I got involved, I got my real estate license and then my broker's license, so I had kind of a small sales operation, and then we did new construction and housing, kind of dabbled in all kinds of real estate. And real estate led me into a restaurant venture, for better, for worse, mostly for worse, kind of a sports bar and grill type of place. There was a fraternity sitting vacant a couple blocks south of our office that we redeveloped into a 13-room bed and breakfast boutique hotel concept. My wife is a horse person, so I'm a horse supporter, and she ran a 50-horse barn doing lessons and boarding and training and that sort of thing. So I'd like to give you a little bit of that background, especially for this class, for managerial economics, that I've been in the trenches, I've done lots of deals, I've done lots of contracts, I've run quite a few different businesses, and so I bring some of that, I guess, real world experience to the table on top of some of the academic stuff. Thank you. I was wondering if that was Oliver for a moment there. That sounds more like kids having fun. So I live in Ottawa. I live just a couple blocks away near the hospital, and I got a son who is going to be a 10th grader, and he is at the kick around playing soccer on the OU fields right now. So I got a couple different soccer connections here. And my wife does lessons still at a new barn. We don't own it, thank goodness, so she doesn't have all those management duties. Ownership of a horse barn is something with plenty of trials and tribulations. So she is a happy boarder there and does horse lessons out of that barn. So that is a little bit of my background. So I can be reached on my cell phone. I've got it on the syllabus. And I also have a YouTube channel called Russ Econ Rocks that has some of the previous lecture capture. If all goes well, if there's not technological difficulty, I will try to post these lectures to Russ Econ Rocks so that there'll be recorded versions of that later if you wanted to reference it. A lot of why I'm doing the recordings is also for online classes so that they have access to lecture material as well as a supplement. So kind of serves a couple different purposes. So the textbook for this is an e-text that comes along with a product called CourseMate. So this is the physical textbook, which is not required. There is the e-textbook that is fairly robust. Did any of you check out the e-text yet? Okay, so Clay did.
I did.
You did too? So e-texts have come a long ways. Have any of you ever used, who has not used an e-text? Let me put it that way. This will be the first one. Okay. So the e-texts have come a long ways. I mean, 5 years ago, it was mostly a PDF version of the pages that are in here. And that will be in there as well. But now the e-texts have gotten more interactive so that you can kind of press and go around and move through the textbook material and get to other learning material as well. So that e-text is incorporated for free with the required online quiz platform called CourseMate. So online, the CourseMate I saw was $118. So that is required, and that'll be part of your assessment for the class. So you do need to get that. And then it's your option if you find a used text or do Chegg or something else. How much was your Chegg looking at?
It's like 40.
40 bucks. So yeah, if you prefer to have a hard copy, you can purchase that separately. And then the other book, I forgot to bring my copy that I have. It's just a short book. Did anybody happen to get it yet? The Super Crunchers? It is just a small book that I think you can pick on Amazon for $3 to $7. It's a cheap book that is really helpful in starting to think about how an economist thinks about problems and applying some of the quantitative techniques that we'll start to learn about in the class. So that's the required material. Does anybody have any questions on that? Yep, Keith?
I don't suppose raising my hand is going to work right now.
Might. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to glance. I might even try to move this thing, maybe not now, but later, because I was trying to set things up so that you guys could see them too. So go ahead. What's your question, Keith?
So you said the book is required. The e-book is required.
The CourseMate is the thing that's required.
And can you get the course mate without necessarily getting the ebook?
No, that is your bonus, that it comes free with the ebook. So it is priced, these online programs like this that do homework and other things, it's at $118, which is about what they run, as far as my experience has been, roughly a la carte anyway. So you're really getting the
Horse mate, is that what you call it?
course.
Course.
Could be a horse. Hopefully it's not the horse's rear end, but last time the students appreciated it that took it last time. It's a good tool to help you guys keep on task on the material.
Okay, so that's where our homeworks are going to be.
That's where your homework's going to be, and your and some quizzes, yes. So it's an interactive learning tool for the class.
Okay.
And so what you might want to do is try the e-text and see if you're comfortable with it. It is possible to print off the e-text. So I've often tried to see if students wanted to have a printing party, and they don't make it easy. You can't just press a button and print off a whole textbook. They make it a little more difficult. But I think a group of students could potentially get together and actually make copies that way. So that was an idea. So yeah, you can print off a version that way if you'd like to. Okay.
Shanita wants to know what the course code is.
Yeah, it's in the email, Shanita. So Shanita, you can hear me, right? Now, Shanita, you can actually send a text message to me. This is good for all of you. Why don't you all try this once? On your chat dialog box, type a little message that just says hello, and send it to this screen here. Well, the one that says Russ McCullough. There. So Shanita, I got that. So you guys can actually message to each other on the screen, and you can send a private message or you can send a message to all. Now, I don't know how long it stays on screen, whether I'll be able to get that or not. So if you guys want to interrupt me, please do, because I'll try to scan and see if you're raising your hand or not, and sometimes that works. But especially for the remote students, just unmute and say, excuse me, or however you want to interrupt me. That's totally cool for me. Okay? All right. Oh, yeah. Clay is in, so I'm not sure. Why don't we try to address that later, Shanita?
Could you see that?
Yeah, I saw that you were in. So Clay is. Oh, you got in.
Yeah.
Okay, so it did work. All right. So yeah, we have people in, so it should work somehow. But we'll get that figured out later. Okay. So course objectives. The super crunchers. I kind of set up as an extra credit that I think you'll want to take advantage of, because the final might be kind of tough. So any of the 8 chapters can be used to earn some extra credit to make up the flub or 2 you have on the final exam. You may earn up to 10% of the value of the course. Each chapter weight, so if you do 4 chapters, you earn 5%. It's a fun and easy read that should engage you in the economic way of thinking. Here's what you need for any of the chapters you choose to do. So what I want you to do is do 5 bullet points from that particular chapter, and then address what fact or stat or comment intrigued you the most in this chapter and explain why. In what way did the economist or super cruncher approach the problem that was different? And you'll turn these answers into Blackboard anytime before the exam. So that is pretty cheap. I think you'll like it. I think it'll kind of change your way of thinking about how economists go about numbers, and it's entertaining. It's a fun book to read. Okay, questions there at all? All right. So a lot of boilerplate language on the first few pages. I double paged this thing for you guys, so let's go ahead and turn all the way to the end. Page 7 on the syllabus. So weekly quizzes, 40% of your grade. Homework and writing assignments, 30% of your grade. And then the final exam, 30% of your grade. That's kind of the breakdown of that stuff. So we'll have some short answer homework problems for you to work on, as well as the CourseMate online stuff that you'll kind of work through. The CourseMate is nice in that it's interactive. It's going to help you learn. So what it'll do, one of the reasons it's connected to the e-text is that if you take a quiz and you miss a couple problems, which you will miss, it will target you to the exact page in the textbook where that topic's covered. So it kind of that's one of the ways that it's very interactive and helps you learn the material, so that you can really target the things that you don't know. Let me make another comment about this text. It's very thin. This is very small for a text. The other textbook that's currently being used online that I'm planning to switch to this is at least twice as thick and bigger. The reason I selected this text is that the author is very good about just giving you some good applied stuff. We know that you don't all have backgrounds in business. In fact, I kind of meant to go through, let's kind of run through the class and give me your undergraduate major, and maybe a minor if you want to throw that into.
Communications, advertising.
Okay.
International studies with emphasis on business and politics.
Okay. Business.
Advertising, PR, and graphic design.
Okay.
Communications with visual communication synthesis.
Okay.
Exercise science.
Exercise science. Okay. And let's go, Mohammed.
Business information systems.
Okay. And Keith? International studies. Okay, mute your microphone. I'm not sure what happened there. And Shanita? Oh, it might be because Shanita put on.
Information systems.
Information systems. Okay. All right. So some of you who had background might have had principles of economics how many years ago? 3.5. Who's the closest?
Never.
Take a guess. Never? Economics? You must have had a little bit with your business international.
Yeah.
You're trying to think?
Yeah, it was a couple years.
Longer than 3.5?
Yeah.
Okay.
About 4.5 years.
4.5. Okay. Anybody else? 6 years from Keith. Thank you. Got that? All right. So it's been a while. So I come into this class not expecting you to know really a lick about it. Okay? So that's my expectation. But my bar is up here. It's not down here. So I'm going to bring you up to speed with the stuff. One of the reasons this book is thin is that the author does expect you to know some stuff from principles class. So part of my job is to fill you up with the principles stuff that you either been exposed to once upon a time or never were exposed to. I'm going to try to fill in some of those blanks for you to kind of work through this book. But some of these chapters are literally 4 pages long. So the first chapters are 1 through 3, which might sound intimidating until you open it up and find that that is the first 29 pages of the book. And the first few pages, I think, are just kind of some intro stuff. So it's fairly short. And the first chapter and the second chapter are really just introductory material. We start to get into a little more technical stuff in chapter 3. So that's kind of the setup here. So on the back of the syllabus, I got week 1, chapters 1, 2, and 3, week 2, week 3, week 4. I just kind of want you to glance. A lot of the stuff, chapters 1 through 10, is a lot of principles of economics that are ramped up to fit a business setting. And that's the other thing that this author does a good job of is putting you into kind of case studies and analysis of what does this way of economic way of thinking mean for a business decision that looks like this. So he tends not to dwell too much in the abstract and to apply some of these principles that I think are important for any manager at a business or government or other institutions for that matter. So then Week 5, we start to get into a little more sophisticated pricing type issues. So I kind of threw one at you already by saying the textbook, the course mate, comes free with the e-text, right? Well, it's all bundled together. That was me just pitching you guys a little bit on how it was structured. That's a price discrimination scheme, and businesses do this to us all the time, right? So we're going to spend a lot of time on what's called price discrimination, on different types of pricing schemes. When are they successful? When do they work? When can we have a student discount? When can we have volume discounts? You know, there's certain situations where those sorts of pricing schemes might work better or not work at all, depending on the market structure. Okay, then we get into some game theory in week 6. And then week 7 and week 8, we get into issues related to insurance and moral hazard and adverse selection, some interesting topics that deal with uncertainty. So prior to this, a lot of our decisions might be that, well, if you make this decision, you make $200. If you make this decision, you make $300. Well, in reality, we faced a lot of uncertainty with that, right? And so how do economists deal with uncertainty? How do we make those decisions efficient? Okay, so questions on the flyby of the material at all? All right, so I want to start off today with a few questions for you, maybe before I even pass this out here. What is capitalism? I want you to pull out a sheet of paper, and I want everybody to put a definition of capitalism. I know you might be screwed on this one, so just put down what you think capitalism is. What is capitalism? It's totally okay to be wrong. So no looking at the books, no Googling. By the way, I didn't talk about my phones. All phones should be completely off. Instant messaging off. All forms of communication off. So I want you guys to be engaged in what we're going to be doing here. So if you don't turn off your devices, then you're subject to some penalty points. Is kind of how that works. So.
I'm on call for RAs or RDs or however, whatever. So.
Okay, so what does that mean?
If it rings and I have to answer it.
Okay. Well, it'll just cost you a point, I suppose. That won't be too bad. So, so how will we know if it's an RA, or you have to answer every call that comes in? Okay.
It should. This and probably one other week will be dealing with it on call.
Oh, okay. So you rotate.
If I'm not,
Then Shanita will be on it. Okay. All right. We can see how that rolls. So otherwise, yeah. Silence your devices. What would be coming up that you'd be on call that would be devastating? So the building, you're the first responder.
If somebody called the ambulance.
So are you allowed to, when you're on call, you have to be like on campus?
Well, in the city, in Ottawa city limits.
In Ottawa city limits.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, capitalism. Get your answers down. Let's start with our remote people. Mohammed, what do you got down on your sheet of paper? I want you to read what you have on your paper word for word.
Okay, so what I have is that capitalism is an economic system that empowers individuals to compete in a marketplace with their value-creating proposition that is not planned by the government.
Okay. Let's see. Give me a number between 3 and 6.
4.
4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Give me your name again.
Brendan.
Brendan, what do you read word for word? What's on your paper?
Well, I didn't really finish, so I can't read word for word.
That's trouble. Why don't you spend some time getting word for word? Go for it right now. Right off the top of your head, I'm just going to wait for you.
Right now, right?
Yep. If it sucks, by the way. I don't care. You even have the benefit of Muhammad's. Okay, go for it. What do you got?
I said open economy in which competition is encouraged and there's not supposed to be any discrimination.
Okay, what do you mean by open?
Open as in just competitive. Like it's open for me to.
Okay.
I'm not shut out. Like I almost have
Okay.
the right to compete.
So you have the freedom to competitors too, or is it just within the city of Ottawa, or what were you thinking?
I was thinking
Within the country. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I put the manipulation of processes that make you the most money.
Okay, the manipulation of processes that make you the most money. Okay. And let's see, we got to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Shanita.
Hello?
Yep.
Wake up.
I'm up. It keeps going in and out, so I get every other word.
Oh, really? Okay. Why don't you, can you read off what you got?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Can you read off what you got?
For capitalists?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Something similar to what, I don't know who said it, but something about freedom.
Read off exactly. Show me your paper. Hold it up to the camera.
I didn't. Okay. I'll write it.
Yes, exactly. So when I ask you guys to do something, I really want you to do it. I'm going to hold you guys accountable to that. So this is part of the activities. When I ask you to write something down, I want you to write it down. Okay?
Okay.
All right, what do you got? Okay, read it off for me, Shanita. Thank you. Read it off for me.
All I said was that I know that it's an economic system.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about capitalism. So I think you guys got the gist of it. It seems like we all have the gist of it, right? Or we think we've got the gist of it. But so what does it mean to engage in a capitalistic system? One way to think about it is, what is socialism? Opposite. In what way?
Like socialism is like when the state's involved.
Okay, so the state controls it. What communism, socialism, the kind of variations of each other in a way. So what about property rights? You kind of said it a little bit. What about property rights in a capitalist system versus socialist?
Well, in socialism, the state's owned.
Okay, the state, and so in a communist system, everything is held in common. So that's communism, right? So nobody owns anything. We all kind of own everything according to our needs, and it's kind of this pie in the sky thought that we can all live in harmony. That the state owns a large portion of things. So there's 100 different variations that have been tried. But one of the things that it boils down to is property rights. And so when you talk about an open economy and the ability to exchange those goods, that's what we're thinking about with capitalism, is that down to the individual level, the individual has property rights, and the right to transfer what they have, the right to crumple it up and throw it in the garbage can to dispose of, right? The right to sell what they have. And so less of the resources and goods that are out in the economy are controlled by the government or somebody else in common, but rather it's all held with the individual. So that's kind of the two things that are opposing each other with capitalism. Okay, so let me try to get this motivated with Tom and Jen. So I'm going to try to screen share. So you guys who are remote, I'm going to screen share one of these screens. Let's see, screen share only. And we'll see how this works here. Okay, so here we have Tom. So I kind of think of the movie Castaway. Do you guys remember Castaway with Tom Hanks? So this is Tom here on the island. Remember he had Wilson, his little buddy, volleyball head. So if we have a guy on an island, is that an economy? Would you call that an economy? In other words, I want you to think about some of the essential ingredients that are needed to call something an economy. So what can Tom do that has aspects of an economy? Let's think about that. One guy on an island, what can he do?
Build.
He can build, right? So he can produce. So he can fish or harvest coconuts, for instance, right? So he has the ability to produce. Good. What else can he do?
People come and go from the island, he can trade.
He could, but if he's all by himself. So what I'm trying to think of is we're going to go there in a moment, but if he's all by himself, would you call that an economy? So we have production.
Well, he can
I'll give you
consume it
that.
himself.
He can consume it.
Consume.
Good, good. So yes, he can consume, Mohammed. So we've got production and consumption. Is that all we need to call something an economy? Do you just need production and consumption?
I think that without exchange, it's difficult to call it an economy.
Okay, good. And I kind of feel the same way. And by the way, the reason I bring this up is I don't know if it's in here or not, but I first posed this question to my principal students years ago. And I said, what is an economy anyway? And so I had them turn to their textbook to look up what an economy was. And to my surprise, in a Principles of Economics textbook on economics, economy wasn't in there. And so they couldn't find it. And I'm like, I was shocked that it wasn't in there. And granted, this is an advanced textbook, but it's not in here either. So you might not find what an economy is in an economics textbook, which seemed kind of strange to me. And so I just kind of posed to the class to think about, well, what really is an economy? And so I tend to agree with you that you can have production and consumption, but without that element of exchange, I think we need at least two people to really be engaged in trade to call something an economy. All right. So we give Tom his buddy Jen here. So Adam Smith is known as the father of economics. He wrote a little book called The Wealth of Nations in 1776. It was the first exposition that talked about trade and kind of formalized the value of a capitalist system, even though he didn't come out and necessarily define it. So he was kind of the forefounder of this. Prior to writing that book that everybody tends to hang their hat on, he wrote a book called The Theory of Mutual Sentiments. And so he was actually a philosopher, and he was concerned about how people engage with each other. And so that's how his work started off. I think he wrote that in 1756, prior to The Wealth of Nations. And so then his next work was Building a Wealth of Nations, after he had thought about the interactions of individuals on more of a moral level, and what feelings and kind of touchy-feely stuff that economists don't always get into. And so he thought that part of how we build our morality is how we bounce ourselves off of other people, and what their perception of us is part of what builds our character. All right, so back to the Wealth of Nations stuff. Each one of them can be thinking about what they want to do. I wonder if my remote clicker works. That would be kind of nice, but I'm guessing it doesn't. Oh, it does. At least for now, anyway, when the battery's good. All right, so I want you to imagine that Tom has a couple production possibilities on the island. If he goes out for a day, he can harvest 8 coconuts and 8 fish, or on a given day, he can harvest 4 coconuts and 12 fish. Now, given that information, what is the cost of a coconut for Tom? So on a given day, he can go out and have 8 and 8. On a different day, he can go out and have 4 and 12. So we can kind of imply a cost. What did you come up with?
A 16th of the day.
A 16th of his day. So what were you doing? Adding the numbers together here?
Yeah, well, 8 and 8, 4 and 12.
Okay. So another way to phrase it is, if Tom's sitting here with 8 and 8, what would be the cost of the 9th coconut? Given this information, if you were to approximate it, what would be the cost of the 9th coconut? Giving up one of the fish, right? So if we start to look at the trade-offs here that are going on with each one, we have 8 and 8 as a production possibility, and we have 4 and 12 as a production possibility. So we got 8 coconut is equal to 8 fish as one possibility, but we also have 4 coconuts being equal to 12 fish. Four more coconuts. If I want to get 4 more coconuts, how many fish do I have to give up? 4. Right? So I have to give up 4 fish. So my trade-off that I have for Tom is that 4 coconuts can be traded for 4 fish. The cost of just 1 coconut is 1 fish. Right? So we can kind of calculate using this simple data what the opportunity cost is of production once we know some production possibilities. All right, so that's Tom in a nutshell. Let's look at Jen. So Jen can do 4 and 8 on a given day, or 3 and 11. So looking at those numbers, what can you tell me about Tom and Jen? Some comparisons. Jen's better at fishing, okay? What else?
Well, you can generalize more stuff.
Okay, so Keith? Nope, you're breaking up a little bit this time, Keith. Oh. Okay, mute your microphone. Shanita, are you muted?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I don't know. We're just having a little trouble with your microphone, Keith, but I heard you, or at least part of it. So, who was better at coconut production? Tom. Who's better at fish production in general? Tom. Tom's better at both things. So Tom has what we call, Keith, can you mute? There we go. So Tom is better at both things, right? If you look at these numbers, look at, he can do 8 and 8 versus just 8 and 4, right? So he's better at producing both things. So Tom has an absolute advantage in production. An absolute advantage in production. So the question is, would Tom ever want to trade with Jen? He's better at both things. Would Tom ever want to trade with Jen? That's the question that the King of England kind of posed to France in trying to engage in trade. Kind of went to one side and said, I know you're better at producing both things, right? You're the best. We suck. But if we trade, we're going to hold quality constant. We're going to hold quality constant. But we're going to show how both parties can be made better off with trade. And that's the magic of the marketplace. Kind of the magic of capitalism is what we're going to try to figure out here. All right, so here we go. You guys already figured out that one fish costs one coconut for Tom. So if we were to graph out Tom's production points, points A and B, they'd lie right here, right? So Tom can have this many or this many, and so we can think about the trade-off. He gives up 4. What about Jen? Jen can be at point A or point B. So if Jen gives up a coconut, how much fish does she get? If Jen gives up a coconut, how much fish does she get? She gets 3, right? So if we think about our trade-off again, putting our equation goggles on, if we've got 1 coconut equals 3 fish, then 1 fish equals 1/3 of a coconut, right? Who's the better fisherman now? Jen can fish for 1/3 of a coconut. What could Tom fish for? A whole coconut. Who's the better fisherman? Relatively speaking, Jen has to give up less to fish. So who do we send out fishing? Jen. If we were somehow coordinating together, if we could somehow coordinate our efforts, Jen is the better person to send out fishing. Jen has a comparative advantage in the production of fish. So Jen is our fisherman with a comparative advantage. Tom has an goods. Cost Jen to harvest a coconut. We're just right. So to get 1, she's giving up 3. So it's pretty costly. Comparative advantage in coconuts. All right. How are we doing online there? You guys okay so far? All right. This thing's going to wear out. I'm feeling the batteries on all these are starting to go dead. Okay. So here is our production possibilities, just kind of graphed out for us to look at there with the cost. Tom's better at coconuts. Jen's better at fishing. So what should we do with it? So if we think about that trade-off persisting over all quantities, which by the way is a little bit of a simplification, but if Tom continues to do more and more coconuts, he's got that 1-to-1 trade-off. So we have a straight line that now is identifying all of the production possibilities for Tom. And same thing for Jen here. We had points A and B. If we just draw a straight line, because we're just assuming this internal trade-off of 1 for 3, 1 for 3, 1 for 3, then Jen could be producing 20 fish. Right? So the idea with trade would be to have Jen specialized in fish production. Just trying to see if I could shrink this little guy here or not. Ooh, that might work. Let's try that. So Jen goes to that point. Oh, no, that didn't work. Let's see, how did I do that? Ooh, just gonna make this thing squirrel all over here. Huh? There we go. Maybe I can shift it up a little. There we go. All right. So this graph combines both productions together. So let me start over here with Jen. So if Jen produces 20 fish and Tom produces 16 fish, his maximum, the world, the whole United States, because it's only got 2 people, could be producing 36, right? 20 plus 16 equals 36. Now, if we want to have some coconuts, who do we send out to get them? Tom or Jen? If the world is at this point all fish, who do we send out to get some coconuts if we want to have some coconuts? We send out Tom, okay? So if I send out Tom, I give up a coconut, I get a coconut. I give up a coconut, I get a coconut. So this red line here is Tom's production possibilities kind of transposed over here. Now, if I get to a point where I have 16 coconuts and I still want more coconuts, my only choice is to send Jen out, right? And now we're going to start costing ourselves 3 fish for every extra coconut. 3 fish, extra coconut. And so this part of the world production possibilities frontier comes to us from Jen's production possibilities right here. It's just kind of transplanted up. The important message here is that this represents the most efficient production levels for the world. The most efficient production levels. So these are what we call productively efficient quantities. So when we start running a business, I know that I started off in the abstract here with coconuts and fish out on the island. But we're going to start putting this into business, right? In decisions that are being made. Who do we deploy? Do we deploy Jen or do we deploy Tom? Those sorts of decisions are very similar at the margin. We're looking at who's the most productive in each spot. So this represents the production possibilities frontier for the world. Now I also added in XA and XB in both of these graphs, just to kind of highlight for you where the production point would be if each one was operating independently. So if Tom just kind of did his thing on the island and Jen did her thing on the island, those were those production points A. If we add them up, they're right here. Now what's significant about this point relative to this point? What's significant about this point versus this point?
Well, it's closer in quantity because he has the absolute advantage.
Which one? This? So what are you talking about when you said this point? What are you talking about? So XA is a combination. Tom's A and Jen's A together. We're looking at the world's production if both of them were at their point A quantities. So all I want to think about is how does that compare? How does XA, what does that tell you about life here between XC and XA? We have what?
Less of everything.
We have less of everything. That's right. Keith? I don't know why your audio is just not coming across right for some reason. I don't know if it's maybe the headphones that you're using or what, but it just comes across a little staticky. Sorry. All right, so we have more of both goods, right? The world has more of both goods. How did we get it? How does the world have more of both goods at XC versus XA? What was the thing we did? I mean, where did XC come from? I'm just kind of backtracking on the logic we just went through.
Fishing.
That's right. We sent our scarce resources to their highest and best use, right? All we did is we used our resources more efficiently to get to XC production levels rather than XA. And the question is there room to make both people better off? Right? That's kind of the key here, is there room to do that? And the way you said it was correct. We got more of both goods. So it's no doubt that this is a better spot to be in as an economy compared to here, right? And we got it through the specialization of labor into what each person was best at. And these are all superior points compared to here, these production points. All right, questions or comments so far? All right, I like to go through this because this is kind of what I call the magic of the market. So let's get to real deal. Let's say that Tom did spend his whole day harvesting coconuts. He's going to have 16. Jen spends her whole day fishing. She's going to have 20. Whoopie-doo-dah, the whole world has 20 and 16. Great, we're at that point. That's the farthest point out. Where do we go from there? Where do we go from there? So Tom starts running a coconut business in a sense, right? He's like, oh, I'd like to have some fish. Is it possible for these two to strike a deal? So Tom throws out 2 fish per coconut. What does Jen say to that? One fish per coconut. Why do you say that?
Why does she want to give up 2, which, possibility of 1, especially if he wants her good.
Okay. Now, maybe, does she totally know how many Tom has? Not necessarily. And the only reason I want to kind of bring that up is I want you to think more about Jen maybe than strategically about how much she can get out of Tom. We can go there, and we will go there, by the way, later when we start negotiating. But right now, I just want you to put on Jen's hat and think what she's thinking. Go ahead.
Well, if it would cost her 3 fish,
right,
a coconut, if
okay,
it was 1 coconut, she would think it would be 1 coconut for 3 fish.
Okay, right.
She would think that would be a good.
So it's a good deal, right? So 2 is okay. How's 1.5? Better or worse? Better, right? So then she only has to give up 1.5 fish instead of 2, right? Would Tom be willing to accept 1.5? Is that a better deal for him? Better than what he can do on his own, because he's 1 for 1, right? So a market is born, right? We just set the parameters for the price on our island. In other words, as long as Jen gets less than 3, and as long as Tom gets at least 1, we've got a deal. Both people are better off. Whether this ends up being 1.2 or this ends up being 2.9, both parties are made better off as long as the deal that they strike is between those ranges, right? So a market is born. Immediately we have gains from trade. The market system, capitalism, has provided benefit not just to one person, not just to the person who was the best at producing everything, Mr. Hotty Toddy over here, right? The benefits went to both people. It's a win-win situation. So often the game is characterized as what we call a zero-sum game, where we'll talk more about this later especially when we get into game theory, where one person wins and the other person loses. In fact, a zero-sum means one person wins. If one person wins 100, it means the other person lost 100. And that is so often people's perception of the market system. They think that if a company makes a bunch of profit, it was at the expense of the consumer. Isn't that right? Doesn't that sound familiar, that people bitch about that? Well, that's not true. We just proved it. Now you guys can prove this to other people. This is a win-win situation. Both parties engaged in voluntary trade, so neither party was coerced here, right? They're both looking to maximize their own benefit. They're in it together. They're in it voluntarily. Even if they don't like each other, they both might want to come to the table anyway. Even if they hate each other's guts, right? because each party stands to benefit from the trade. We just showed it. All right, let me pause there. I start to get excited about the stuff if you haven't noticed. So, questions so far? Yes?
I have a question. What if Tom comes out and says, what if Tom comes out and demands 3 fish for coconut? Is it worth Jen's time? Or should she just do her own thing?
I think she'd just do her own thing. I mean, what would you do? Kind of put yourself, that's a good question. If Tom says, I'm not doing anything unless I get 3 fish, then what does Jen say? Keith, I wish you could be participating more actively. I love that you're jumping in, but I don't know what the problem is, but we keep getting static on our end, unfortunately. Maybe if you type it up, if you want to get something exciting, we could try typing up. You could try again, though. Go ahead.
I said that I think Jen would accept it because she's willing to pay up to 3 fish. So she's not basing her decision on, she doesn't know what it costs Tom to get coconut.
You were really clear for a moment, and then at the very end it got staticky again. So it must be, I'm guessing it's your microphone. It was really good there for a second, though. So you're saying 3 fish, but do you guys think she would do the 3 fish?
It depends.
Yeah.
Depends on what?
It depends on how much effort it takes her. So like, even if she gets, it would be, if it's really easy for her, work effort.
Okay. Now,
if it's not, then
I agree with you, and you're building more into what the model is here. So you're bringing up a great topic that we will rely. So here's the deal. So economics is often a model car. So when I was a kid, I got the General Lee. You guys know the Dukes of Hazzard? Seen the remakes of that or whatever. So I was a Dukes of Hazzard fan. Every kid was that was in 7th grade or 6th grade. And so I got the General Lee car, right? And so when I got the General Lee, I could look at it, I could see the proportions, the mag rims, Confederate flag, I got a really good idea of what the General Lee was, but I didn't know exactly the way the General Lee was. That's what economic models are. They're an abstraction from reality that are based on some assumptions. And so this is important to think about as we work through some of the problems, is that we can all day long say, but what if this happened? But what if this happened? And so one of the ways that the economist tackles that is to have assumptions of the model, right? And so we know that we're not dealing with reality, but we hope that we gain some insights about reality from a carefully constructed model. And so with this, since we haven't built in some of that stuff, which are great comments, I would say Jen would not do that deal because she could do it herself. Now, in reality, I hear totally what you're saying is that, well, if the day is done and she's got 20 fish and she wants a coconut, it's pretty easy to go, whoop, and now all of a sudden I have a coconut and I don't actually have to go harvest them, right? So we're not allowing that to be in there. We're really dealing with just the numbers and the facts that we have and the assumptions that are built in. We could also weave a story of a multi-time period model where Jen, in an act of good faith, will do the trade today, even though she's getting no extra benefit from it, in hopes that Tom will come to the table tomorrow and she can make herself better off, right? We could tell all kinds of stories like that. But right here, she's not made any better off by making that deal, so she wouldn't make it. But the key is that Tom would be an idiot not to strike a deal somewhere in between because it's to his benefit too. So it's to both parties' benefit. Okay. Any other questions or comments on that? All right. So Jen might say we got a deal. She might renegotiate. So here's our general production possibilities frontier. By the way, this is not in your textbook. This is just kind of, there's going to be some good things in your first 2 chapters on why we trade with each other and the benefits of trade. So this is kind of an introduction to be thinking about how we want to use scarce resources and why trade can make both parties better off, this win-win situation. And so here's the situation for both parties that's kind of exciting to me, is that each person acting independently is right here. And if they are the only person on the island, like Tom was when we started, what you produce is what you consume, right? There's nobody to trade with. What you produce is what you consume. So truly the world's production possibilities was simply this line. But now, through the magic of trade, and each person specializing in what they have a comparative advantage in, each person has consumption possibilities that are further out than what they could do themselves. Both Tom and Jen have consumption possibilities that are greater than what they could do themselves. And that's the gains from trade. That's how both parties are made better off. Calculate how much better off they are with trade from post-trade to pre-trade. But this economic model tells us that the United States is harming themselves by putting up trade restrictions with Russia. Something you might know. You guys familiar with the whole Crimea thing? We're following international. You might probably, since it's a little closer to home country, been following that than some of our American friends here. So Russia, Putin comes in, grabs Crimea. We say, hey, we don't like that, and we don't really want to do any nuclear weapons or anything, or really kill you, because it would cost a lot of money, and we're kind of in the crapper already. But I tell you what we're going to do. We're not going to trade with you anymore. We're not going to buy your wheat. We're not going to buy your stuff, right? We're not going to trade with you. So by putting these economic sanctions on, what most people don't understand is that we're hurting ourselves. If we're Tom and we're saying, sorry, Jen, we're not going to trade with you, we're undoing what we exactly did here. It hurts both parties to not trade with each other if you were trading before. So when we try to impose those penalties on Russia, we really got to think about what we're doing with that, and I think it's the right thing to do. I'm not trying to get into that. I'm just saying this is the fact. This economic model teaches us that that is going to hurt us just as much, maybe even more, than it hurts Russia. And they don't seem to care, because they knew that would be coming at a minimum if they were able to offshoot war. Okay, any other last comments, questions there? You guys good? Give me a thumbs up, okay? All right, so this brings us to today's topic. How does that concept manifest itself in today's economy when Tom and Jen have been busy and the island has populated itself to 300 million people, right? So we went from Tom and Jen, they got busy, and now we've got 300 million people. Does the same thing apply? Can we apply the coconut and fish logic to today's complex society? Or is this just one of those economic abstractions that we can say, oh, that doesn't apply today, because we got lots of people, oh, you can't give me that kind of explanation. Things are way more complex. We've got the internet, for crying out loud, right? So how does that work? Well, what I'm arguing is that the exact same concept applies no matter how big the economy gets. And so the economy is really about households maximizing their happiness. So we'll spend a little bit of time on this in this book, but in principles class we get into what's It turns out in the United States, about half of those people that are made up of households, about half of them go into the labor force. Well, what's the labor force? The labor force is really Jen going fishing and Tom harvesting coconuts, right? We all go to school and we learn different things. We have different skills that are either innate or learned that we've done through our schooling. And so those things command a value, a wage of some sort out in the private sector by some sort of institution over here. And so a group of people get together to make those coconuts or to make those fish. And so I like to think of our island as this way, that the idea of specialization in trade manifests itself with the formation of firms, which are voluntary groups, right? The government doesn't force these groups to come together. So we're still got that voluntary freedom thing going on, where they choose to work together some way or somehow. Now, we might have a boss that seems like he's more of a dictator or something, who knows, but you can quit your job, even though it might seem like something that's not a good idea. It's all voluntary. As long as we have all of these voluntary associations that are free from coercion, we are back to the island, that people are able to go out and maximize their happiness by trying to generate an income here. And then eventually that leads to trade, because these firms are willing to buy the resources that are owned by human beings. Again, we sometimes get the perception that the United States economy is run by big corporations. Oh, big corporations own everything. Well, they really don't. If we think hard about it, corporations have what? What do we call the owners of corporations? What did we call those people? What's that? 1%. The 1%? That'd be the 1% potentially the rich. Mohammed?
Shareholders?
Good, shareholders, right? So shareholders are human beings. Human beings that wipe their butt when they go to the bathroom, right? I mean, corporations are owned by shareholders. Companies are owned by individuals. Everything ties back to a human being somehow here at this point. At least we haven't gotten to the Terminator, Judgment Day 3 or whatever yet, right? So everything here is owned by the households. All the scarce resources. So we've been talking about labor, land, which covers all natural resources, right? So all kinds of natural resources. Land, labor. Anybody remember the other basic resources of the economy? I'll give you a hint. Land, labor, capital. Good. So capital in economics class is not money. We do loosely refer to that in finance class sometimes, and sometimes in everyday language you say, oh, well, we got to raise some capital for our new business, right? And we got to raise money. But in economics class, capital is the machines and tools and buildings. It's stuff that helps make other stuff that doesn't fall into the labor category, right? So this marker is actually a piece of capital for this lecture, because it's helping convey the material to you guys. Those computers. Now granted, a computer can also be a personal computer that may not have anything to do with capital. It's all about consumption. So when you guys buy electronic devices that aren't being used for some productive use, then it wouldn't really fall into the capital category, right? So it would be more on consumption. But if we think about the productive resources in the economy, we've got land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship is the last one that I like to throw in there. So the entrepreneur is I think of the kind of the quarterback that pulls together all these scarce resources. If all of those resources were just sitting around in buckets, then they wouldn't turn themselves magically into something. So we need an entrepreneur to pull together the scarce resources and turn them into something. All right, so that brings me to, we'll have a break here in a little bit, by the way. Oh, I didn't even talk about timing of breaks, did I? Maybe I'll kind of take a moment to say that after I find what I'm looking for. Let's see, where is that? Well, this one will work. Okay. So before I jump into this, so this class is scheduled to go 6 to 9:30, and that's usually built in with a couple 10+ minute breaks. And so I usually like to kind of shrink that down into one break or maybe 2 short breaks. If you guys have to get to the bathroom or something, you can kind of feel free to get up and go at some point. Otherwise, I'll try to to bring a break sometime around, we're probably getting close to it now, but after an hour and a half-ish type of time frame. I mean, if you really have to go and get up, of course, I'm not going to stop you. So feel free to do that. But otherwise, know that we'll have a break, and then we'll try to get out of here around 9-ish, 9 to 9:15-ish, I guess, depending on how things are flowing. So we'll get out a little bit earlier that way. So unless you guys would like to do bigger breaks and stay till 9:30. Nope. Okay, I see some head shaking. Is that all right? Online, you guys all right? Thumbs up. Okay, got the thumbs up. All right, so what I like to do is think about the economy with these buckets of resources. So land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So the households, again, own all of the resources. Here's the people out here that are trying to maximize. The definition of economics that I like to use is the study of trying to satisfy unlimited wants with limited resources. Nice and simple. So we're just saying that these guys have unlimited wants. And so you might argue back, well, what about Mother Teresa? You know, she didn't want a darn thing. She was scrubbing the poor people's feet in India. And my argument to that would be that even Mother Teresa had unlimited wants. She didn't want it for herself. So we're not assuming selfishness. We do assume self-interest. So Adam Smith, I think, was pretty careful. And by the way, there's been some debate over the last 200 years on this one. So Adam Smith's famous quote is, "It is not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker from which we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest." Adam Smith, one of his opening quotes in The Wealth of Nations, "It is not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker from which we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest." What does it mean to be benevolent? So the first line is, it's not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker. What does that mean?
Goodwill.
Okay, goodwill. What else? What are some other words that you'd say for if somebody is benevolent? Goodwill is probably a good one. What else could you use in there? What's the opposite of benevolent? Anybody got that one?
The opposite of benevolent.
Benevolent, yeah.
Not caring.
Not caring, right. So benevolent is caring, charitable, goodwill, right? So it is not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker. In other words, it's not because they're nice guys and they're charitable and they want to give things away. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker, from which we expect our dinner, but quite the contrary, it's from their regard to their own self-interest. It's because they care about themselves that I expect to get fed. I don't get it. That question was asked to me when I interviewed for a position years ago, prior to getting my PhD. I'm, in hindsight, glad I never got that. But the vice president of the university said, I never really understood economics. How does something good come out of something bad? It's like you guys assume greed as kind of the underlying premise. How do you get something good out of something bad? He's like, I don't get it. And that was my question during the interview with the vice president of the university. So Adam Smith says it's not the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker, but from their regard to their own self-interest. What makes that work? I mean, that's a good question. I think I get it now, but what do you guys think about that? good.
It's
So,
really to benefit us, benefit them.
all right, so it's to benefit them. So it comes back to the mutual benefits, right? So what we saw with Tom and Jen is the fact that knowing that if they're made better off, I'm made better off. The win-win. It's kind of acknowledging that win-win situation.
I think a good example of that is farmers.
Okay? In what way? Go ahead.
Because they plant their corn, they do this to feed America.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, they're making money to put into their
Right, right. They're not doing it because they just want to give to the hungry, right? They want to, and that might be a small portion of why they're doing it. I'm not trying to throw that out the window completely, but it's because of their own self-interest. And so what I meant by selfishness, or to kind of contrast selfishness with self-interest, is that your self-interest, and by the way, Adam Smith said this in the Theory of Moral Sentiments, is that your self-interest includes those people around you. And it may include a lot of people, but here's you, and here's your friend network, right? And we're not talking Facebook, but we're talking about people that you might actually know and care about, right? That's your self-interest. It includes other people, and he freely acknowledged that. So we got to be careful when we start thinking about greed, which is really pure selfishness, where your world centers around you. And you guys know people like that too. Now the beauty of this system is that if it is all selfish, I don't think we get as good of results from a moral perspective and from other things, but the market system still works. In fact, we can have people who are a little more selfless and people who are selfish trade with each other, and they'll still both be better off. So it's kind of awesome how that works, is that we can assume the greediest of all greedy for every single individual, and we will a way to make both. But it gets even sweeter, it gets even better for society if we have self-interest in the way that Adam Smith talked about, to where we actually do have some concern about the people that we're close to. Then it gets even better. So it doesn't get any worse, it only gets better, I think, again, from a moral perspective and other things, on taking care of people when we have self-interest defined that way.
So is that talk about self-interest in the way that, like, I want to take care of my family, or like a parent wants to take care of their child, or the fact that, like, I don't want Lindsay to suffer, or I want her to have what she wants.
Aww.
Like, but like, is it
Yes.
from actual providing, or from just
Yep.
care?
No, it totally covers all of that. That's right. So as much as we care about the coconut and fish that we put into our mouths, we also care about our families' mouths, right? And that is part of the system. And so there are economic models that take that into account. So it's not all about selfishness. It's not all about greed. But since I brought greed up, what keeps greed in check? So let's go back to the butcher, the brewer, the baker. Let's say that the butcher jacks up his steak prices. They were $10 a pound. He says, you know what, $20 a pound sounds good. What keeps greed in check?
The other butcher?
The other butcher, if there is one. And if there isn't one, what might happen? The baker says, you know, that guy's an idiot cutting meat. I'm a baker. This is science. I can cut meat all day long and still bake my goods. If he's getting $20 a pound, I can cut meat and sell it for $15 a pound, and so he does. Right? As long as we have freedom of entry and an open economy, like you're saying, being able to start up and do that, that will keep the greed in check if we do have some of those greedy people in the system along with us. And so that's the competition check that's an important ingredient that we'll learn more about as we get into different market structures too, in that a lot of problems come in when there's no competition. And I'll give you one example of a big entity, a big institution that sometimes inhibits competition, and that's the government. The government comes in and takes over. When we talked about socialism, then it's especially obvious. If they take over the train industry or the trucking industry or the steel industry or the coal industry or whatever, right? They have no competition. Somebody wants to start up a business, they say that's illegal. I run the business. That doesn't work. It doesn't keep things in check. And so the same thing is true whether it's industry or whether Anything else?
Yeah, but what if no one's gonna buy the product for the price? Is that gonna keep
Okay. Good question. What do you think?
like is it gonna keep it like cheap? Like is it gonna go down with the price? Because no one's gonna buy it.
That's right.
You
So
know,
that
that's
would that would be the first response. So if the price is too high and nobody buy, oh, you're back to the butcher. Like if he jacks up the prices. Okay, good.
Not about it.
So as good a time as any to kind of talk about this. So let's get away from the butcher for the break here and get back to the real world. Steak prices double. What do you guys do as consumers? What's your response? Eat chicken. Good. That was one thing, right? So you start to seek alternative substitutes. And so that's a topic that we're going to spend a lot of time on through the semester is what is the availability of substitutes? And so that might cause them not to buy the meat. And so now if the meat is on the shelf for a day, on the shelf for 2 days, the butcher, because it's going to spoil, eventually has the manager special, which I love over at Price Chopper and Country Mart, is when they get that slightly gray meat where they really cut the price. That's when I jump on it, when it's aged a little bit. So I just can't help myself when I see a deal on the prices. But that's what they do, right? And so prices come down, you're absolutely right. And they might choose to not, buy the butcher if they're ticked off at them or whatever, but that's the market response. Again, as long as both parties are voluntary on both sides, then the pricing system reflects the relative scarcity and the relative desires of consumers. It's the price system that is allowed to fluctuate. That's the great equalizer in capitalism, is that prices are free to adjust. So when your president talks about jacking the minimum wage up from its current level to $10.10 an hour, that is a price control, which we'll spend a little bit of time on. Now all of a sudden that price, just like the meat, is not allowed to fluctuate according to supply and demand, according to people's desires for meat or otherwise. It's stuck. And so when that price system is not allowed to fluctuate, then it creates a constraint on the economy, on the flow of resources to getting to their most efficient place. And that's just one example.
So if that minimum wage goes up, could prices still not fluctuate at a higher level?
Yes, I mean, I don't want to get too far down this track, but if minimum wage goes up and if we're a fast food restaurant, then hamburger prices go up, right, of the fast food burger. So do you go out to eat as many times as you are currently? If the price of burgers double, do you go to McDonald's as often? No. Maybe you'll go run over to, fast food would be a bad example, but you might be making your own sandwiches at home, right? We start to seek substitutes because of that restriction. And so it starts to change behavior. And so the market always has a way of winning, I like to say, for the most part, although it does get screwed up. People make adjustments to that price change. But it's usually to the harm of some. I did a little bit closer study on the Congressional Budget Office's report on how many jobs would be lost with the raise of the minimum wage from where it's at, 7.25 up to 10.10. And in large part, you're paying for the minimum wage with people losing their jobs. So a large part of the minimum wage legislation, which of course is intended, good intentions don't always meet the mustard though, the intent is to help people with low wages. But part of how you're funding that is through people losing their job. That's a fraction of it. Now you might say, well, that's worth it, or there won't be too many people that lose their job, or whatever. But economists study that. They study how many people are going to lose their job. And then we also can study then how much will hamburger prices go up, right? So if you're paying $2.25 for a basic burger at the joint, now it's going to be $2.75, right? And so part of that minimum wage legislation is going to be through increased prices. And so then the rhetoric would be that, well, prices are going to go up, but that's okay. It's worth it. We're giving people higher wage, we're bringing them out of poverty or whatever. That's just not the case unless you study all of the factors that are going into that. And then what does the thing that I didn't mean to go this far down the trail, but I can't help myself. What are companies going to do that have a lot of minimum wage workers? What are they going to do over time? Like tomorrow they might not be able to change very much. They still might have to have X amount of people working X amount of hours. But what are they going to have incentive to do at their fast food joint?
Find alternatives.
Find alternatives. They seek substitutes, right? Then there's a machine that we can all, instead of having a person take our order, we'll all step to a little kiosk, just like we do with our airline tickets, and we'll press a button, and I want a Big Mac, and I want a large fry, and this, and we won't even have a human being there, right? They'll just automate things. So they're always seeking, and then more people lose their job long-term from that minimum wage. And then the answer is to raise it again. It's just, these are things that economists talk about and get kind of worked up about sometimes. So, and I have some ideas on much better ways. I think the minimum wage should basically go away. I think there's lots of other ways to fund people that are in poverty situations. Let's let people work and fund the difference of their pay. They can pick up a job for $4 an hour, and we think that we should be paying them $10.10. Let's just give them a check for $6 an hour. I think that would be a better solution than setting the minimum wage at $10.10. Somebody, let the market determine wages, and then we just cut them a check. If you don't like it, your taxes might go up, by the way. I mean, I'm okay with paying more taxes. I'm saying there's a better way to get the result that you're from potentially higher income brackets or whatever, some other general pool. I mean, I have some ideas. Again, I'm way too far down this path now than where I was going. But there's other things that we can study on how to fund that might be more efficient than just the knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I get it, minimum wage. If we pay people more, then they'll be happier. No. There's a lot of economics behind it that needs to be taken into account. Okay, so stocks and flows of the economy. Speaking of flow, I have a feeling I could go on a run again. Let's take a little break, since this picture maybe made me think of maybe some of you need to go to the bathroom or something. So let's take about 5-10 minutes, okay? Just take a quick break, kind of rest our brain, and we'll reconvene here in about 5 minutes or so. Looks like we lost Shanita.
I'm so sorry.
Maybe not. Maybe she's not on there.
She wasn't on there the whole time.
Well, she had a bad connection, so if she didn't have the audio, that gets pretty tiring. Oh, I should stop.
I love that topic.
Oh, I can. Yeah, can you hear us?